What is going on, guys? Money Webby here, back again, week 4 with my favorite tournament plays, GPP options, to give you a little bit more leverage against the field with some under-owned guys, some guys that can really pop in their matchups. So I got a few guys at every position for you to consider here and kind of maybe put in your own builds and stuff like that for your lineup. So go ahead and drop a like in the video before we get going if you guys are enjoying this DFS information. And really just helps get my videos a little bit more exposure so I can keep these videos coming your way week in, week out. So definitely do that. And if you happen to be new here to the channel, hit that subscribe button to get these videos the rest of the NFL season. If you guys play NBA DFS, I do content and information every single night for those slates, so some good stuff. Definitely subscribe to continue to get these videos and information. So let's just get into it. First quarterback up is going to be my boy Phillip Rivers here going against San Fran. Probably the worst secondary in football now with Richard Sherman going down with an injury. He'll be out for a few weeks. And the Chargers, they have a really good shot of getting like 30 points or even more in this game. They have an implied total of 28.5 here. And San Fran could move the ball a little bit. I could see the Chargers defense kind of sleeping on Berthard, and maybe this game still stays pretty close. You never know with the Chargers. They kind of play down to their competition. So I think Rivers can have an extremely good game here. Be able to get like 3, maybe even 4 touchdowns. And throw for over 250, maybe 300 yards. So an extremely good matchup, like I said. And their offense has a little bit more explosion to them with Mike Williams now integrated more into the offense. So with Williams on the outside, Keenan Allen the running backs out of the backfield, I think Rivers can just slice and dice this defense. So really good upside. And people could be overlooking him with more attention kind of on Melvin Gordon and stuff like that. So that's my first quarterback. And for my second guy, Carson Wentz, he looked pretty solid coming off the ACL injury last week. And that's an underrated defense in Indianapolis. They have really looked good the first couple of weeks. So I'm not surprised that he did struggle a little bit in that matchup. And he also was without his boy Alshon Jeffery. So I wasn't able to find as much work down the field, a little bit more dink and dunk using the 2 tight end set. With Alshon Jeffery, that looking like he'll be back, and also Jay Ajayi looking like he'll be back. The offense adds another dynamic to them. So I think Wentz could get some more yardage here in this game. Get the guys a little bit more going, like it adds more space in the offense with Jeffery on the outside, and it opens some things up for Aguilar and also Zach Ertz and even Goddard in the middle of the field. So I think Wentz can have a better game here, get around maybe up to closer towards 300 yards and a few more touchdowns. And I mean, this was a guy that was in the MVP discussion. Probably would have won the MVP, honestly, if he didn't get hurt and continued to play as good as he was playing. And he had the second most fantasy points per game out of all quarterbacks last year with 21.8. So, I mean, this guy has the upside to definitely go ahead and return a ton of value at his price tag of $5,800. I think he could be overlooked because he wasn't very good in week 1, so people might be scared to play him. And this Eagles team is fantasy friendly to the extreme. They run a ton of plays, very fast paced. They're currently the 4th fastest paced team in the NFL with the 4th most plays. So I like Carson Wentz a good amount there at 5,800. Should be fairly under-owned. And for my final guy, he's kind of burned me the last 2 weeks in these GPP videos, but I'm going to go back to the well just based on his ownership being very low. And he still has an upside with how many times he's really passing the ball week in, week out. So Andrew Luck here, I mean, 2 out of his first 3 games, he's thrown for 40 passes and 53 attempts. So, I mean, he still has an upside if he can just get some more yardage, do a little bit more things down the field. And, I mean, he's been getting a ton of criticism on him not throwing the Hail Mary and his arm strength. So, I can see Andrew Luck here being a little bit pissed off, trying to push the ball down the field a little bit more. And I think they got to take the training wheels off this guy to see if they can get a little bit more pop in this offense. If they don't, I mean, they're just going to be losing more games than they want to be. So I think they got to take off the training wheels. Andrew Luck came out and said that he can make every throw. So he's got to come out here and prove it against a very weak Texans secondary that got kind of burnt against Eli Manning and the Giants offense that was looking really bad the first 2 weeks. So I think Luck could get it going here. I mean, he still has the downside where he just doesn't have it still. But, I mean, based on the leverage you get, he's going to be really low owned, I think. And this is a matchup that is definitely prone to being kind of ripped apart in the passing game. I mean, the Colts can't run the ball at all, so he's probably going to be in line for another 40-plus pass attempts game here. So 5,500, the game has a pretty high over-under as well, so they're expecting a good amount of points, and it is in the dome. I mean, normally in the dome, quarterbacks with kind of weaker arms can just control their passes a little bit more, so he could have struggled. There was some wet conditions at Philadelphia last week, so that could have affected him a little bit, and Philadelphia is a really solid defense. I mean, Houston is probably the worst defense he'll be facing out of all the 3 games compared to the first 3 weeks. So I think he can get it going here. I mean, like I said, downside still there, but the upside is there just based on how often he's throwing the ball in the matchup. So that's my final quarterback. Andrew Luck, Carson Wentz, and the Phillip Rivers, all those guys have really good spots and just opportunities to get a lot of fantasy points and pretty low owned. So now for running backs, though, I got 2 Patriot running backs that I think can both be really solid here. So Sony Michel, he's going to be the more popular option in this matchup with Rex Burkhead going out for the season. So that means more opportunities for Sony Michel. I mean, he did get a good amount of opportunities. He just didn't do much with it last week against Detroit. I mean, 14 rushing attempts in a game where they weren't able to move the ball at all is pretty damn solid. And I think they'll be able to get it going a little bit more here against Miami, especially if they get Josh Gordon in this lineup. It's going to open things up a good amount. So I think Michel here, it looks like he's kind of shaking off some rust running the ball. He definitely didn't look too good on Sunday Night Football, but he is coming off a knee drain, so I think that kind of maybe slowed him down a little bit, and that kind of game could maybe be shaking off the rust his first 2 games. So a good matchup against Miami in a game where they could easily get up here and kind of hand the ball to Michel a bit more to kind of turn the clock down, and they should have a lot better success in moving the ball. They really struggled against Detroit in that defense. Could have been because Patricia kind of knows the Patriots better than anyone that they'll be facing all year. So there's definitely some things to take into account. I mean, Tom Brady didn't look nearly as good as he can. So this Patriots offense should be able to bounce back here, and Sony Michel will probably be the goal line back if they do make it down there without Burkhead. So he has the opportunity to punch in 2 touchdowns, and he could definitely get some more work if they get up big and just kind of turn the clock down in the 3rd and 4th quarter. So that's my first option. But then you got James White if things kind of go the other way. Say the Dolphins get up quickly 14-0, then I'm going to be expecting a lot of James White, and he can really get a good amount of receptions here with how involved he's been this year compared to previous years. Last year when they had Dion Lewis and Burkhead, James White was kind of only getting around 30 to a upside of 40% of the snaps. But week in, week out this year, he's been getting around 50% of the snaps. So he's getting some more opportunities to rush the ball and receive the ball. And with them not having Edelman, especially in this offense, and Hogan kind of struggling, James White has actually been a solid option for them out of the backfield receiving the ball. So against Miami, some linebackers like Kiko Alonso, who was extremely bad against running backs last year in coverage, I think he can definitely get open here against this team. And like I said, if the game script goes more in James White's favor, then he can have a really good game at only 5,400, and he's going to be probably pretty under-owned. I think more people are going to be going to Sony Michel, but both these guys have really good upside depending on how the game kind of turns. Even if the game's close, I think both these guys could have really solid games. So that's my second option in James White. Michel, the cheaper price, but James White, the lower-owned guy. So for my third running back, we're going to be sticking in that game. Kenyan Drake going against this New England defense that looks extremely bad on the edges and the linebacker play. They're really slow. Dante Hightower coming off the shoulder injury, I believe. I don't know. I think I don't know if there's an injury to his knee or something as well, but he just looks really rusty, very slow on the edge kind of defense, and the linebackers have really been struggling in coverage as well. They did just lose another linebacker in Bentley, who is actually probably playing as their best linebacker so far in the year. So I think Kenyan Drake can burn these guys in coverage and also be able to get some nice rushing yards on the edges, those kind of toss plays and those kind of stretch runs where they get to the outside and he'll be able to turn upfield. So this matchup kind of suits more for Kenyan Drake's strengths compared to Frank Gore, who's a slower guy, more middle interior kind of guy with those middle kind of A-gap runs and stuff like that. So I think they'll be going more to Kenyan Drake over a guy like Frank Gore, like we saw last week with Kerryon Johnson. He looked extremely good against his Patriots defense comparison to a Garrett Blount, who just looked slow and couldn't get anything going. So this matchup favors Kenyan Drake, and he had a field day against his Patriots defense last year with 193 yards in Week 14. He had over 100 on the ground, 70 through the passing game. And especially if this Miami team does get down, I would suspect them to go more to Drake compared to Frank Gore. His snap count still has been pretty good. It's been around like 60 to 70% week in, week out, but he just didn't get any touches at all because he was really struggling against that Oakland defense for whatever reason. They were kind of leaning more on the passing game. But this is the matchup where I think they'll be more run heavy. Because the Patriots' cornerbacks still are pretty solid on the outside. So I suspect a lot more Kenyan Drake in this game. So a 5,200, and people are pissed off at him with based on his usage. I think he'll be pretty low owned. So a really good value and upside there is my final run. Now my final running back. Actually, I got one more for you, and Leonard Fournette. It looks like he's going to be playing here. And whenever Fournette plays, the guy just gets a million touches. He got 12 touches against the Giants week 1, and that was like in maybe a quarter and a half. I'm not sure exactly, but he was getting a ton of touches, and he was being extremely effective with them. 9 carries for 41 yards. Which is really solid against the Giants' run defense that isn't too bad. And they were using him a little bit more in the receiving game, which is a good sign as well for his fantasy upside, especially in PPR. And he's a solid price tag at only $7,000. And I suspect the Jaguars will probably be in control here a little bit. I suspect the Jets' offense has really struggled to keep the ball keep their drives moving, kind of a lot of punting and stuff like that. So that means a lot of potential touches for Fournette again in this game. He got a full practice in today on Friday, so I suspect him to play. Against the Jets last year, he got around 30 touches. It did go to OT, but a lot of that was still in the regular quarters of the game. So I think Fournette, really solid upside. He's just involved so much in the offense when he's on the field. And this Jaguars run blocking is really solid. The Jets struggled against Carlos Hyde last week. He had a really good game. So Leonard Fournette, nice little value, and people could be scared away from him due to his injury, the hamstring injury. So that's my final running back. Definitely some downside with all those guys, but low owned. Besides really Sony Michel, probably, and some good upside with Drake, Fournette, James White, and even Sony Michel, all good upside. So now for wide receivers, the first guy I'm looking at is going to be Geronimo Allison for the Packers here, with the news that Randall Cobb might be out for this game. He's questionable with a hamstring injury. That's never a good sign for him to be popping up on the injury report middle of the week, and especially a hamstring injury that can slow a guy down like Randall Cobb, who kind of relies on his shiftiness, and he can struggle to get open at times, definitely when he's less than 100%, and he really struggled last week. So I think this could open things up for a guy like Geronimo Allison on the outside, with Devontae Adams probably going to be shadowed by Tre'Davious White, who's looked extremely good this year. He shut down Stephon Diggs last week. Diggs only went for 17 yards, and White was on Diggs for most of his routes. So against a guy like Adams, he could slow him down, and Allison could get a few more targets. I mean, he's been very effective every time Rodgers has looked his way. 2 for 76, 6 for 64. He's probably been the most effective guy receiving the ball when he has been given the opportunity. So if they can just give him a few more targets his way at a nice price tag at $4,700, I think he can have an extremely good week, especially with Randall Cobb less than 100%. So I really like Allison in that matchup. And we saw Adam Thielen have a really solid game against the Buffalo Bills last week with Diggs really shut down. So that's my first wide receiver. And for my second guy, Mike Williams here at $4,500. I mentioned how this Chargers offense is really taking some new upside with Mike Williams on the field. He just gives this offense a lot more kind of this ability with the jump ball plays that he can make in the downfield kind of routes where he can just go up and get the ball and just make play after play. So 4 for 81 last week and 2 touchdowns. I think he has that upside again here in this matchup. I mentioned that San Fran has one of the worst secondaries in football, probably even the worst secondary right now with Sherman out. They have really bad cornerbacks on the outside. So I think Williams can have a very good game. Keenan Allen was out of practice on Wednesday and Thursday. He did return on Friday, but still, that's a bit alarming. It could signal that he is less than 100%. And the slot cornerback for San Fran is probably actually their strongest point of the secondary. So Mike Williams on the outside can have a really good game. Definitely has the touchdown upside with that jump ball ability. So that's my second wide receiver. And for my second guy, I mentioned how Alshon Jeffery looks like he'll be back. He was dealing with the virus. It's like a 24 to 48 hour virus, they're saying. So I would suspect him to be back here on Sunday. And when he does play, he is normally the go-to guy for Carson Wentz. He had the highest target share last year out of all the weapons here. And the outside cornerbacks for the Titans can struggle. Malcolm Butler's having an extremely bad year. So if he gets matched up on Butler, he can do some damage to him. And Dory Jackson is pretty good, but he's more of a speedster kind of guy. And Jeffery's more physical of a wide receiver. So I think he could take advantage of the matchup as well. Tennessee's coverage against tight ends has been the best in football at like limiting fantasy points to tight ends. So I think Alshon Jeffery could have a really good game here. It's definitely risky with it being his first game back. But the fact that he was a full practice on Wednesday, coming off the shoulder injury, I mean, he can stay in shape even though he had a shoulder injury because he can be working out like his lower body and stuff like that and running even with the injury. So I think he'll be fine here, ready to go, and has it upside and a good Eagles offense. So that's my third wide receiver. Another guy coming off injury is Doug Baldwin. I think he can offer some good upside here going against Arizona. It looks like he's good to go. He practiced every single day this week. And he comes back to a really good matchup going against Arizona. He'll be avoiding Patrick Peterson, I would imagine. Peterson hasn't been shadowing guys this year, more staying on one side. So I think Peterson could limit a guy like Tyler Lockett on the outside with Doug Baldwin in the slot, being that move the chains guy. Great for PPR. Can definitely rack up some receptions here. And the Cardinals' run defense actually has been pretty solid the last two games. They limited Jordan Howard and Todd Gurley, like their yards per carry was less than 3 in both of those games. So I think Doug Baldwin in the passing game could be more effective here compared to the running game, meaning more pass attempts for a guy like Russell Wilson. Also Anthony Miller, he really struggled in the first couple of games, wasn't really involved in the offense for the Bears, but when the Bears matched up with Arizona last week, he was kind of the go-to guy until he got hurt. He had 4 catches for 35 yards in around like 2.5 quarters, but then he got hurt and didn't play anymore, so wasn't able to reach that full upside. But a guy like Doug Baldwin, he looked angry on the sidelines last week, yelling at some coaches. I think he's ready to go, has a built-up adrenaline, and just wants to get on the field and have a huge game. This is a great opportunity for him to do so. So this is my final wide receiver, Doug Baldwin. So you got Baldwin, Jeffery, Mike Williams, and Allison, some kind of lower-cost guys with some really good upside and probably low ownership in their matchups. So that's the wide receivers. And now for tight ends, I think Gronk can have a huge game here going against Miami. He faced off against them last year in one game. He went 5 for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I think that's exactly what Gronk can do, especially if Josh Gordon is in this game. He'll open up a lot of things over the middle of the field for a guy like Gronk. And Miami is down one of their safeties, I believe. So that can definitely open some things up over the middle of the field, kind of where Gronk kind of makes his money, those like 20-yard passes over the middle. So at 7,000, he hasn't been able to reach that full upside since week 1. And we all know that Gronk can pretty much roast any kind of defense thrown at him. And he's kind of mad in the media. I think his brother said something about how he was mad about how they're using Gronk. So in this game, I think Gronk can just have one of those like angry Gronk kind of games where it just goes off. We know that he has an upside any given week, so I think this could be the one that happens on an angry Patriots team. Angry Gronk, if Gordon's playing, open some things up over the middle of the field. He can stretch the field. So 7,000, great upside. That's my first option there. Even though he's going to be high owned, like his upside is so great where it doesn't really matter at that point. So for my second tight end, Trey Burton, he could definitely garner some good ownership as well, but I think this guy has really good upside at his price, like at $3,900. So if like you got a guy in GPP with that solid of a price, and say he goes off for like 7 catches for like 80 yards and a touchdown, I mean, it's kind of worth it at that point, obviously. And Tampa Bay has probably been one of the worst, if not the worst, defenses against tight ends so far in the year. They've allowed 329 yards at tight ends, the most in football. So this can be the spot where Trey Burton finally reaches that big yardage upside and that gets that score as well. So that's my second tight end. And for my third guy, JuJu Howard, I mean, he's been graded as the best tight end in football this year per Pro Football Focus. He's looked extremely well. I mean, looking extremely good, and his usage and just his opportunities have gone up every single game. It's gone from 2 targets to 4 targets to 8 targets. I did have a lot of pass attempts last week, but still, it's good to see that he's kind of been trending upwards, and he's just looked so good, a lot better than Cameron Brate. Just adds some more upside and athleticism to this offense, especially in the passing game. So I think he'll get another game with a lot of looks. This Bears outside coverage can be definitely solid. They do run kind of a zone defense, which kind of forces things more up the middle of the field rather than on the boundary. So I think a guy like OJ Howard can see around 5 to 6 catches, and he has that big play potential any single play where he can just stretch the seam route and just take one to the house. So a 3,500, an extremely good price tag, and against the Chicago defense that is solid, but I think OJ Howard can get the better of them in the middle of the field. So that's my final tight end. I think you could go under-owned against that Bears defense because a lot of people are targeting the Bears defense. So now for defense, kind of run through this really quickly, but the Browns defense is probably one of the best defenses in all of football. They're really underrated, and they've had some really good games against two of the best offenses and probably in football, against the Steelers. 16 DraftKings points against the Saints, 7, and against the Jets, 9. And they're going against an offense in Oakland that Derek Carr, he can be sacked a good amount. He can force some balls, and Denzel Ward could definitely lock down Amari Cooper if he sees a lot of Amari Cooper in this game. Ward has looked really good on the outside, and Cooper is a guy that kind of can disappear any given game. So if Derek Carr doesn't have that safety blanket with him, could be a long game for this Raiders offense, and the Browns could definitely get after him. With a guy like Myles Garrett, and they're also getting the other defensive end. I can't think of his name on the top of my head. It's like Ognu or something like that, some weird last name, but he is definitely a beast. So they have one of the best pass rushes, one of the best outside cornerbacks, probably in football so far. That's how well he's been playing, and Denzel Ward. So they really match up well against this Raiders defense. So that's a good option at 2,900, and I could see them being overlooked. And now the Colts defense, I mentioned them in my first video this week as one of my defenses, and the same thing goes. Really cheap, really underrated defense. I think they could get some sacks against a bad offensive line, probably the worst offensive line in football in the Texans. So not much to it, really cheap. Sack ability, they got 5 last week against a really good Eagles offensive line, so that's definitely impressive. And for my last defense, this one definitely has the most risk involved, but the Saints, they've been absolutely terrible on defense every single week, but there has to be some kind of breaking point where they get it going here against one of these offenses. So against the Giants, I could definitely see the Saints getting up here in this game like 14-0, and Eli Manning has to go to work, and their offensive line is another team that's really bad. So a guy like Cameron Jordan could wreak some havoc in this game and get around like 2 to 3 sacks, and even Eli Manning can be forced to throw a bad pass here if the pass rush is getting to him. Eli Manning is very hot and cold as a quarterback, so this is one of those games, like I said, normally when a team gets up, that's when you're going to have like the best upside of getting those drafting points because they're being forced to get in passing situations. And the Saints' run defense has been extremely good too as well. They limited Carlos Hyde to like 2 yards a pop, and also Tevin Coleman to like 1.5 yards a pop. So if they can stop Saquon Barkley, make this offense one-dimensional, Eli Manning can definitely get sacked a good amount and throw some picks and stuff like that. So that's an outside kind of option there. I think they're definitely going to be overlooked because it's going to be probably has a good chance of being a shootout, but the Saints can still get some good drafting points even if it is a shootout. So that's my final defense, really cheap as well at 2,500. So that is it for the GPP options. You got your quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and your defenses upside and lower owned guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Be sure to slap a like if you did. Really helps me out, and keep these videos coming to you every single week with the more likes we get. And also, if you happen to be new here, like I said, hit that subscribe button to not miss out on these videos the rest of the NFL season. Some really good information coming your way. So comment any questions you might have down below. If you have any other ideas, if like you like someone and if you want to know if I like them as well or anything like that. And you can follow me on Twitter at MoneyWebby for any other questions. I probably can answer you a little bit quicker on Twitter if you tweet me or DM me there. So good luck again on this slate. I hope you guys win a ton of money, and we'll see you back here again next time.